There is a scare campaign gaining momentum about Donald Trump, and the scare campaign's happening here in Australia. Headline after headline is suggesting the Australian economy will suffer under a Donald Trump presidency. The Sydney Morning Herald says Trump's victory could wipe $36 billion from the Australian economy. The Guardian writes a second Trump presidency would put Australia on a collision course with the US. The Fin Review states a Trump win means higher interest rates and weaker Australian economy. Realestate.com.au reports Donald Trump's election win could hurt Aussie homeowners, but not everyone agrees. We like to get some common sense from Leith Van Onselen, the chief economist at Macro Business, and he's on the line. Leith, good morning.
G'day, Ben. How are you?
Good. The scare campaign's underway.
Oh, mate, it's absolute Trump derangement syndrome here. It's just chicken littles, everything's falling from the sky, doom and gloom, etc., etc. Just the usual stuff, mate.
Let's go through it one by one. Trump's victory could wipe $36 billion from the Australian economy.
Look, they always like to put out really big numbers to make it sound scary, but, $36 billion over, decade or so, it's actually a rounding error when you look at it, as the size of the Australian economy, which is, trillions of dollars. Look, certainly, if Trump goes ahead with his tariff plan, which is basically a slap of 60% tariff on China and 20% elsewhere, which I think will probably be excluded because we've got a free trade agreement with them, that certainly will negatively impact our iron ore demand and coking coal demand. China is our biggest export market for commodities, and obviously less demand for China means that prices of those goods will probably go down, and volumes might sell a little bit less, and that's obviously negative. It's not the end of the world, mate. And the other thing is we don't know how China's going to react. So China could react to the fall in demand there by increasing stimulus, which is what it often does. It builds a whole heap of stuff, which could increase demand for those goods. And on the inflationary side, I think that's a bit laughable. It is true that the financial markets, the futures markets, have pushed out their calls for rate cuts till July next year, which is after the election. And Trump's election does create some uncertainty, which means that the Reserve Bank in the short term is probably more likely to do a wait-and-see approach because they don't know exactly what his policies are going to be, and that could delay interest rate cuts by a month or so. But over the medium term, Trump's election is probably actually deflationary for the Australian economy because if the US slaps a 60% tariff on China, what that means is that China's goods are going to be dumped into other markets across the world at lower prices. So, for example, China will probably end up dumping cheaper goods into Australia because they're not being sold into America anymore. We'll probably end up with even cheaper electric vehicles coming in, all this sort of thing. And those things are actually likely to be deflationary for the Australian economy because we'll get lower imported inflation. So I think everyone just needs to calm down a bit. We'll just see how it plays out. It's certainly, I can't see it being doom and gloom for the economy, but those are the headlines.
Yeah, well, when you have a look at the headlines talking about Trump and the impact on inflation, when you dig down into the detail, the Reserve Bank Governor Michelle Bullock is saying what you're saying. A Trump presidency, quote, might be inflationary in some ways, but it might be deflationary in other ways.
Yeah, and look, certainly it does increase uncertainty. I mean, whenever you get a change of government in the biggest economy in the world, and obviously, look, he's a bit of a loose cannon. He said a lot of stuff during the campaign. We don't know what's going to stick. He won't even be sworn in until January, so we don't know exactly how it's going to play out. But it has raised uncertainty, which means that the Reserve Bank might wait a little bit longer just to see what the policies are going to be.
Daniel Mookie, the New South Wales Treasurer, warned previously the biggest threat to New South Wales is the re-election of Donald Trump. This was a long time ago before the victory last week. He says Trump will disrupt international trade. Is there any sign of that happening?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look. Certainly, he will disrupt international trade. I mean, if he slaps on a big tariff on China and 20% on other countries, probably not us, as I said, because we've got a free trade agreement with them. That's certainly disruptive. But to what extent is that going to hammer the New South Wales economy? New South Wales, sure, it sells thermal coal to China and other places, and there could be marginally less demand for that sort of stuff. But we're not talking doom and gloom here.
We are obviously very close allies, and one of the first phone calls that the incoming president made was to Anthony Albanese. We're working with the US to produce critical minerals, which is an industry dominated by China at the moment. Is there a chance that Trump could roll back that collaboration between the US and Australia?
Look, possibly, but he might also increase it too, because we have a whole bunch of critical minerals that the world needs. China provides a lot of that stuff. They might pivot their buying towards us. Who knows? But it's certainly. I think a lot of the headlines that are coming out are just scaremongering and just doom and gloom out of nowhere. Let's be honest, we've seen this with Donald Trump for years, where basically, everything's doom and gloom, everything's a headline, and it's just more of the same.
What would have been better for Australia, a Trump presidency or a Harris presidency?
Yeah, I'd say probably a Harris one marginally, maybe just because she's probably more likely to be a known quantity. Again, the issue with Donald Trump is the uncertainty. So it's a big change in administration. He said he's going to take an axe to a whole lot of areas. He's going to change things up, et cetera, et cetera. We don't know if he actually will. But that just raises uncertainty, whereas obviously a Harris election would have just been more of the same. So it would have been exactly what we've been getting. We know, just more of a known quantity. And that's better for, I guess, the economy, for confidence, et cetera, in the short term. But we don't know how it's going to play out. But certainly, again, Ben, all these headlines that we're getting just seem to be blatant scaremongering, just way over the top. Let's just see how the cards fall. I'm not particularly concerned about it. I think the first thing the federal government should do is actually expel Kevin Rudd from Washington, because he's an embarrassment. He's basically attacked Donald Trump ruthlessly before the election, and now that he's elected, he's basically untenable.
It's unlikely that America will force Kevin Rudd out, but what you're saying, Anthony Albanese should take the initiative.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, Kevin Rudd's been attacking Donald Trump for years. He's Australia's ambassador. I mean, that's not really a good look. And if you want to maintain a good relationship, I mean, the fact of the matter is Australia has to work with whoever the president is. We don't have a choice who the administration is. Donald Trump's been elected. He got elected with a stomping majority, and we've got to work with it. So it's pretty untenable to have the ambassador there who's so anti-Trump. That just seems ridiculous. So they should remove him straight away and replace him with someone else.
It'll be a bit of a nervous time for Kevin Rudd, you can only imagine. Leith Van Onselen is with us, the chief economist at Macro Business. Just leaving the United States to one side and focusing on Australia and interest rates, what would you be doing if you were the RBA governor?
Well, I think based on the RBA statement before the election came out anyway, the results came out, they were incredibly hawkish. So they basically said that underlying inflation's too high. They said it straight up in their statement, which basically meant that interest rates are going to be on hold until, probably mid next year, I'd say, or early to mid next year. And then after the election, obviously, it just raised a bit of uncertainty. I think the RBA is doing the right thing. They're just basically sitting on their hands, going to see how the cards fall, and they'll cut rates if the data aligns with their thinking. And at the moment, the underlying inflation's too high. It's at 3.5%. It's above their target band. They've been very blunt, saying that that's got to come down. And but I will say this, Ben, the most nervous person in the country about the RBA interest rates will be Anthony Albanese, because he desperately needs the RBA to cut rates before the next election, and time's running out.
Well, it's always good to talk to you, Leith. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Anytime.
Leith Van Onselen, the chief economist at Macro Business. Yes, Anthony Albanese will be hoping and praying that interest rate comes before the next election, due by May next year.